another amazing guest, someone I've looked up to for so long. Multi-award winning composer, sound designer, audio director, and music supervisor and writer too. Kenny Young, how you doing? You okay?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. How's things been for you? Been okay?
Yeah, everything's good at the moment. It's as I'm sure everyone you speak to will say, it's obviously strange days at the moment. But in general, things are all right for me and my family, so things are good.
I'm so glad to hear me. How has this? I always have to ask my guests. How has this past 18 months been for you? You been okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of tumultuous time insofar as me and my family moved back from the southeast of England back to Scotland, where I'm from and my missus is from originally as well. And so that was a bit of a crazy thing to do during a pandemic, but we're just at that stage of life where we're making a decision about whether we're going to stay down. I've been in London, the southeast, for like 20 years just about, so it was quite a big change to sort of remove ourselves from that. But it just, we've got young family, we're just thinking about the future, and our kids started primary school and stuff, so we're just thinking it's now or never really. So yeah, we moved back last year, and yeah, we're not quite settled yet. I was explaining my setup. We're in sort of temporary accommodation at the moment until we find somewhere to live more permanently. But yeah, it's been good. We've got access to grandparents now.
Oh, that's good.
It's like that's the big life upgrade, is getting that on tap.
Oh, thank God. Are they local to where you are at the moment, your grandparents?
Ish. Yeah, kind of. We're about 45 minutes away, but yeah, it just means we can do things like call them up at relatively short notice and escape without the kids, which is something that we didn't do before. We didn't have any support, so yeah, that's been the big thing. But despite all the other weirdness that's going on, yeah, there's positive stuff like that that's happening in our lives. So
brilliant! Because obviously you said you were born and raised in Scotland and you moved to London, and you're back now. I mean, how was that change for you going from Scotland to London back to Scotland for you?
Yeah, originally I went down to Bournemouth. I did a master's degree down there in sound design, so that's what originally took me away from the old country. And then and job as well. So once I did that degree, I knew I wanted to work in games at that point. I was kind of focused on trying to get into the games industry as a sound designer. And my first job was at Sony in London, so that's where I sort of ended up in that neck of the woods. And then I subsequently went on to work for Media Molecule, who were in Guildford. So I kind of moved out to Surrey. Sorry, darling. And it was all kind of work related stuff. But initially it was a bit of a culture shock, actually, which I kind of wasn't expecting, because obviously being brought up in Scotland, you feel like you're part of the UK, and you kind of view yourself as Scottish and British all at the same time. But down in Bournemouth, just interacting with other students and stuff, not everybody, but certain people, it became a sort of a recurring thing, is they kind of viewed you more as Scottish than as British, I guess. And I found that strange, because in my own head I was just me. So to all of a sudden to be labelled as like the Scottish guy, it was just a bit odd. And I wasn't that comfortable with it to start with. It kind of annoyed me. I was like, yeah, I'm Scottish, but like, enough of the haggis jokes, please. There's only so much of it you can take. And I think actually I've spoken to this about other sort of like expats friends, not just Scots, but anyone who's from like another country, who moved to another country, will have gone through something similar, and probably a lot more extreme than what I went through. But interesting experience. And yeah, there's a certain amount of, if you're going to like move to another country and live there permanently, because at that point I was just a student. I moved back to Scotland and then subsequently got the job in London. So at some point you just kind of have to get used to that, really.
Of course.
And so you either sort of just put up with it, and sort of it just becomes like water off a duck's back, or you don't like it and you need to go home. And I think a part of you dies. I think you kind of have to just be like, right, I'm just going to have to put up with this sort of attitude from certain people and get on with it. And you do. You just, you can put up with anything, really. And so moving back to Scotland's been interesting, because I've sort of had to re-engage with my Scottishness a little bit. Just things like, you go from a big city back to like I'm in quite rural Scotland now, and everyone's just a lot friendlier, and like people, like there's eye contact, people say hello to you, even complete strangers, you just sort of acknowledge each other, which is obviously in a big city you just generally don't do because like everyone's anonymous. And so that's been quite a weird sort of transition, and sort of give me a little slap and sort of remember what it's like to be like that, and to sort of re-engage with a slightly different culture and stuff. But yeah, no, it's all good. I really enjoyed, my wife too really enjoyed our time in England, so there's no sort of anti-English sort of sentiment for our reason to be back to Scotland. Although there probably is a little bit. At least Scotland seems a much more attractive place to be right now in terms of certain aspects of politics in the UK overall. So maybe not get into that, given the topic of the podcast. But like, yeah, I think we're also just feel a little bit. It's nice to be home, obviously, and it's just it felt good, the right move for us to make.
Oh, brilliant! That's brilliant. I mean, do you have your own setup at the moment in your temporary location where you're staying?
So it's like, in terms of my studio and stuff, it's just a bedroom studio. I mean, since I went, so again, I talked about my career. I worked in house in the games industry, like as an employee of game developers, and then about 6 years ago, 2015, I went freelance. So I've been working from home since then, and it's just been out of bedrooms. When we move into our new place, we bought a new build, we're able to customize it a little bit. So I've got what was part of the garage is now going to be my studio. So I've managed to customize that a little bit, and that'll probably end up being the nicest space that I've worked in, certainly as a freelancer. But I won't know until I'm in there and what it's like and how I've treated it and stuff. But it might end up being the nicest room I've been in, even professionally, because although games are thought of as being like, making loads of money and stuff, generally speaking, audio departments you're not in like, lavish control rooms or with loads of amazing facilities and, designed by acousticians and studio designers and all that. It's generally done on spending as little money as possible. So the rooms I worked in, even at Sony and Media Molecule, they were nice compared to like a home bedroom, but they weren't like, these plush recording studios or anything like that. So I'm used to fairly sort of humble room to work in, and it's interesting, like, you don't need hugely expensive equipment or rooms to do great work, but of course it helps. So yeah, I am making a bit of investment in the new studio just to sort of make it a nice place to be, because it's it's what you do every day. It's nice to have nice equipment and nice room and stuff. So yeah, speak to me in a year and see see what it's like. But yeah, just now, just working at a bedroom, spare bedroom in the house, and yeah, it's what I'm used to actually. So
really? Yeah. I was going to ask actually if you kind of missed that kind of studio vibe at like Media Molecule or Sony, or do you prefer working in your kind of home studio setup?
It's like all these things, there's pros and cons. Like there's aspects of it absolutely miss, but it's probably mainly more on like the social side. And I don't just mean like outside of work. I mean like just like seeing other human beings on a daily basis. Like I definitely miss that, like having lunch with people and the water cooler chat, and just in terms of like work and team dynamics, just being able to like, I guess it's different for everyone now because of the pandemic and many people are working from home. So particularly in the games industry. So everyone's getting a little taste of what it's like for me as a freelancer. But that's the other thing to say, is that because, to go back to your question about how things have been over the last 18 months, no big change for me as a freelancer, because I already worked from home and I'm used to working remotely. So like if anything, it made life slightly easier, because it meant other people were more cognizant of like the way that I have to communicate and deal with stuff. So kind of in a weird sort of way, work-wise, kind of like an upgrade as far as I was concerned, which is unusual, because for most people it was obviously radically different, and and it's had its challenges, but yeah, like for me that's just what I'm used to.
Oh, brilliant. Do you still play violin by chance? I know you started off playing violin when you were younger.
That's right, so I started out as a fiddle player. I guess my main instruments are violin, stroke fiddle, and guitar, but I'm kind of a multi-instrumentalist as far as I'm not scared of picking anything up and getting a sound out of it. I enjoy just trying to coax something usable out of anything. And I've got a huge sort of collection of stuff I've bought over the years. And when I'm working on music for a project, I do try and get some original acoustic instruments in there that I'll play myself, and it's fun sort of choosing stuff. But in terms of my fiddle, like I don't really make much music, and I don't actually listen to music really at all, which is a bit odd probably for some people who like, when music's such a big part of their lives. And it's hard to just say why. I guess partly it's because I'm a sound designer as well. A lot of my work is just doing sound stuff rather than necessarily music. I do both, and it tends to come in. So the other thing to say is that I tend not to work on more than one project at the same time. I try and focus on one thing so I can do as good a job as possible. There's inevitably some overlap at the end of a project, beginning of another one, especially games tend to slip, and they always run late. So there's always a little bit of like, I can't help but work on multiple things at some point in my schedule. But generally speaking, I'm not like taking on multiple things and saying yes to everything and all that kind of thing. But what that means is that, I'm generally doing sound or I'm doing music. I tend not to do both unless it's a really small project, a little indie thing where I could do both. So I tend to ping pong between the two, and the projects I work on are probably anything from 6 months to a year. So I do end up going through like phases of like being hardcore music, it's all music, and then I just switch and it's all sound, and it's quite binary like that. But when but a lot of the time I'm not doing music stuff, I'm doing sound stuff. But even when I'm doing music stuff, I'm just like immersed in the project. But the reason I don't listen to music or really make much music is it's just a kind of habit I got out of, and a lot of this goes back to me originally getting into sound design. So when I was student, I guess, when I was, even before then, so like I had a musical upbringing, so like say violin was my main instrument, and I've been playing that since I was like six or seven, I think. And I was really privileged enough to get lessons every week for from that point up until I was 18, 19, 20, whenever it was I stopped having like lessons. But that was just an investment my parents made, wanted me to learn an instrument, and I was musically gifted and all the rest of it, so they sort of recognized that and wanted me to learn, and so that's kind of like my musical background. That's where I get my insight into traditional Scottish folk music, and because I was classically trained, obviously sort of violin repertoire music, and I played in orchestras when I was a student. Symphony orchestra and string orchestra and stuff like that. So that's all like a part of my DNA and kind of what's going on in here. But I think when I was I don't know what age I was exactly, but the fact that I studied music technology rather than pursued music performance meant that even at sort of late school age, I was obviously realizing that performance really wasn't for me. I'd done quite a lot of it at that point, and was like semi-professional as far as I was like playing my fiddle and getting paid for it in like a touristy Scottish gig I had when I was a student, which paid really well for someone of that age and lack of experience. It was easy money and good money that I made in the summer playing for wealthy American tourists whilst they ate a plate of haggis, neeps and tatties or whatever. And actually, me playing the fiddle, I played for like 15 minutes halfway through this thing, and that was so the main two guys could do their costume change from like one kilt into another. So it was but that was like kind of the path I was on. But it's not like I hated it, I just didn't feel like this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So there was a little bit of an existential crisis there, I think, because when music's kind of what you've been doing your whole life, and I had never really questioned it, it's just part of what I did and who I was. But to realize that that's not what you want to do with your life, it just felt a bit like, well, what? Just sort of asking these questions like, why do I do this? Like, and it was just a bit awkward, and maybe it's just because of the personality type I've got. I didn't then just keep music as like a thing that was going, as rather than it be my main thing, just being a hobby or whatever. I just like stopped all musical activity and went hardcore into studying sound. And it's a bit weird. Like I just stopped playing, stopped listening to music, just like cut that arm off.
Wow.
Basically. It was just my way of dealing with what was quite a difficult issue. I guess, like psychologically. So then, yeah, but on the plus side, the great thing for me about working creatively with sound, which I kind of discovered doing my undergraduate degree, is that there's obviously a huge amount of transferable skills there, because all those, like, particularly maybe as a string player, all those, like, you know, like really, I don't know how to describe it, but like those listening skills, basically, all those little micro adjustments you're making to get your tuning right and stuff, like, and and practice, you know, that whole thing of, you know, playing a piece over and over and over and listening to yourself and making little micro adjustments to try and get better, playing it slower with a metronome and all that stuff. All those habits basically create like a certain mindset and way of thinking, which is totally applicable to working creatively with sound, because it's all the same things where you're listening to stuff, evaluating it, making little adjustments. And, you know, anyone who's ever been in a studio while someone else is working and just been like, that's really annoying. Like, oh, that kind of, it's like, it's something that's very much something you get into that mindset and you just kind of do stuff. And I think that was really good for me, that I'd found this other thing that was very similar, but ultimately kind of different. But also, I think what I really liked about sound was that it's something that everyone is exposed to, but it's not spoken about. It's just completely taken for granted. It's not part of the culture, really. You know, like when we raise our kids, the closest thing we get to it is obviously language. It's not music, but it's kind of reliant upon transmission of sound between us. Like, sound's the vehicle for carrying the information that's encoded in our voices that then gets decoded in other people's brains when you're talking. But that, again, that's just sort of taken advantage of and taken for granted, but it's not really spoken about. So sound is this weird thing where it's like a shadow, like a sonic shadow that is everywhere, and it's also the means by which music is allowed to exist. So it's hugely important. But music's the thing that's this massive part of culture, human culture, big part of what it is to be human, and sound is the thing that enables it. But sound is just like this forgotten, unknown entity. So to discover sound as a thing that you can work with, and just to make you aware, like, oh yeah, that thing that's always been there, and just become conscious of it, was like an amazing thing, really. And I think sound people are like, everyone falls into sound. The only people I know who were like indoctrinated into sound from an early age are people who just so happen to have parents who were like sound designers. And even then, like, I think it's not like I'm like desperately trying to indoctrinate my children into being sound designers. And it's the same thing. Like, I don't teach them about it particularly. So again, the cycle sort of persists. So it's one of those things which I think a lot of sound designers kind of come to terms with. There's a lot of sound people are often thought of as being quite moany, because they often talk about being forgotten about, and that sound isn't understood. But eventually you just realize that that's just the way things are, and you kind of get over that, why doesn't anyone care about this as much as I do, kind of feeling that you have as a sound designer, and just accept that actually that's one of the massive strengths of sound, is that it works on a really quite a subconscious level and on an audience and on players in games, and that allows you to, like, in the same way that, you know, music's massive sort of emotional signifier and quite emotionally manipulative. You can really impact and control, to a certain extent, certainly push the feelings that an audience have in response to the moving image or to a game. And sound can do that too, but it's even more subconscious than music is. And so no one gets into sound design for the rock and roll lifestyle, because audiences generally are just affected by it but unaware of it. So it's not a look at me mummy kind of thing to do. It's very much under the radar and sort of unappreciated. But I think that's also what I quite liked about when I first got into it, was that I discovered this whole other world that people were completely unaware of, and so it feels like magic, basically. And so I got really deep into that, and like I said, I was really fortunate. So I did my master's degree in sound design, so that kind of took me to like next level up, if you like, of understanding. I don't think higher education is necessary to be a sound designer, but it was useful for me and things were were paid for at that point. I was just at the end of that cusp of people who had their degrees for free. Certainly, I think that's still the case for Scottish students, but I know it's not the case for the rest of the UK. So I also lucked out in that regard, just by being born at the right point in time. But yeah, I did the master's degree and was kind of new at that point. I wanted to work in games, and was really lucky to get that first job at Sony in London. And again, there wasn't really any music in my professional life at that point. It was all sound. And when I went to join Media Molecule, so I was at Sony for like 3.5, 4 years. Yeah, you've done your homework.
I have. I have.
And you've done your homework. I'm very impressed. So, this stuff's on the tip of your tongue before. I'm like trying to remember these things. I'll ask you next time I forget. I'll get you to remember me. But I went to Media Molecule, and I guess my job there, I was hired as like the audio lead. So I was responsible for the entirety of the audio experience, but there was no expectation from me or from them that I would write any of the music in Little Big Planet. My job was to make sure that the game sounded good, but that I would be, working with the composer they actually had already hired before they brought me on board. And I was responsible for the put together licensed soundtrack, certainly from a creative point of view, but not from like the actual licensing point of view. There's people at Sony that handle the sort of that and the legal side of things. But it's just a weird thing happened where because I had this musical background, and there was some times in the project where we needed some music, but it was just quicker for me to put something quick and dirty together than it was to, commit to licensing something or pay the composer to do it. So I would just like throw something together. But people in the team were like, hey, this stuff's really good, so we should put that in the game. And me being a bit like, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because it wasn't something I'd done with that sort of intention. And so it kind of snowballed from there. And so there was a bunch of music in the first Little Big Planet game that I'd written, just a few little things that we kept. Probably the thing that I put the most time into was the menu music, because that was one of those tricky ones where that's a piece of music that people are going to hear over and over and over when they're playing the game. And I felt like I kind of knew what that needed, so I did that. And then I did a little bit more music on Little Big Planet 2, and I ended up writing half the score for Tearaway, which was a Media Molecule game on the PlayStation Vita, which again had quite a strong folk influence. So I was able to draw on my sort of musical heritage and DNA there. And then when I went freelance, I wasn't actually sure whether people would want to hire me or not as a composer, because the way I viewed myself certainly was first and foremost as a sound designer and audio director, someone responsible for creating audio experiences, but not necessarily known or respected for my musical chops as a composer. And I was glad to see that people did want to pay me money to do that. And I've had some success there since I went freelance, which has been great. But that's kind of my musical journey, if you like. A sort of strong musical upbringing, then ditched it, and then it sort of slowly crept back in. So I've been kind of reconnecting with music in some ways over the last 10 years, having had that sort of strong reaction to it. But I still I'm not in the habit of listening to music. The only time I really listen to music it's mainly when my kids want to hear something, if we're all in the kitchen or whatever, and I'll listen to Baby Shark or whatever, whatever trash. Sorry, everyone's just like, but I mean, I guess like most people whose job is music or sound, like you can't be listening to music whilst you're writing music, because you're using your ears for other things. So it's just not really part of my life. So to answer your question, do I still play my violin? The answer is no.
I love it.
That was a very, very long answer for a simple question. Sorry, that'll happen. I love to talk, but
I love it when people talk, and I love it. You learn so much as well, though. But go back to what you said earlier, actually, that you kind of found your niche, not your niche, but your kind of aim in life at university, where you want to create games for games.
Yeah.
Even before university, where you obviously your masters in sound design, did music technology too. Did you even know, even before uni, that you wanted to create something for games or another field, or was it?
No, but I think if I think back to that point when I was like, 15, 16, 17, then I was, so I wasn't a gamer when I was a kid because my parents buy us a console because they were just thought it was trash. They're like, rot your brain. It was probably literally what they thought, which horribly backfired, obviously. But we got like a family PC in like I think it was like 1995. So this is like the DOS Windows 3.11 for work groups, and then Windows 95 came out that year. So like I was just at that point, and that which was a transitionary point. But I sort of through that became a PC gamer, played things like Doom, SimCity 2000, X-Wing, bunch of stuff which might bit before your time, I would imagine.
No, I know. I used to enjoy those games.
but that was like my sort of my formative gaming years, if you like. I did quite a bit of I was just generally quite a creative kid, so I would do quite a lot of messing around with mod tools, building Doom levels, Rise of the Triad, just in the Podgy game levels, messing about building stuff in Quake level editor and stuff like that.
Quake as
so
well.
I think I could have quite happily been a level designer or something else in games, but at that point I wasn't. I think there's different days. It's not quite pre-internet, but the internet's not what it was now. Aren't the resources that there are now, and games were a definite like black box. No idea how they were made. Enjoyed playing them, and it was great that even at that point there was companies like id and Apogee releasing their design tools and stuff for people to mess about with. So I enjoyed like digital creation, I would say, and I'd done a little bit of like music writing, probably more through my schoolwork from my higher and sixth year studies music that I did, but I hadn't done any like sound work. That was definitely something I discovered at university. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was like, I want to work in games at that point. I just enjoyed games. And I think I can remember the moment where I learned the job of like sound designer. And I think it was in the credits after I'd watched The Matrix in the cinema. So I don't know if that was like 97 and 98, whenever that was, but that'd be about that same sort of period where it was a student, I guess, just starting to leave school and be a student. And I just saw sound design. I can't remember, was it Dane Davis, or was that the composer or the sound designer? I can't remember who it was, but it was like, and it's everything. I just had that penny drop where I was like, oh, some people got paid to like create the sound in this film, and it was amazing. I think that's why I wanted to see who did that. I almost was just like, because I would realize that someone had done that, and then I was like, wow, I want to do that. That would be a cool job.
Yeah, definitely.
So in a way, I think I was focused probably on film to start with, but the more I looked into what the route, I'm a pragmatic sort, so I want to know like how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
So I did my research, and as far as I could tell, and I can't imagine things have changed that much, but I don't really know. The route into the industry in the UK was you would be a runner working at a post-production house somewhere in London, one of the most expensive cities in the world, earning less than minimum wage, probably, making tea and toast for people. Seemed to be like the route in, and that struck me as a very strange way of like getting a job, because it's not an apprenticeship, it's just pure exploitation. And like that just didn't sit well with me, and I just I certainly didn't have the confidence to think, oh, I've got some ability here, I'll eventually break through that and like rise, and like then I'll be a sound designer. Like I just thought that was just like, that just looks rubbish. Like and then the more I looked into games and discovering that it's very different. It's more like the film industry probably was in the 1930s and 40s, because it's like there was like it's changed a bit now because of the rise of independent game development, but in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, it's very much a studio system. So nearly everyone was employed in-house as employees at publishers or developers. So my first job was at Sony, and so like got a job, got your like and okay, it wasn't great money because I was a junior, but I was still probably earning a lot more than people who were starting out as runners working in the film industry. and got my like pension contributions and all the other benefits you have when you work in house as an employee. And that for me was like, the choice was, just like a pragmatic one of what is going to be like the easiest route to employment. And I guess the hard thing with both those things is just not many opportunities. And even now, probably more opportunities now than there was back then, just because the industry's bigger. But getting a junior position at that point in games was incredibly difficult. There was only a handful of jobs came up in the UK each year. Like, I think it was like half a dozen was like my like 5 to 10 jobs a year, say, at that point, intentionally for like inexperienced people straight out of school. Which, that statistically is not not great odds. So that also, realizing that, made me just work really hard to make sure that I had the best skills that I could, and that I'd done as much work and practice and research and had the best demo reel that I could. Because that's the other thing that's essential for getting work really in any creative industry, is being able to show people what you can do. And when I was an undergraduate, I hadn't actually done any work sound to picture work. It was all much more conceptual, quite academic stuff like electroacoustic music composition, which is music composition but using sound. So it comes out of the musique concrète movement from the 1950s, but it's sort of this vestigial thing that still exists particularly in Europe, in sort of what would have been used to have been electronic music studios, which is quite a sort of 50s 60s concept. But it's where things like the BBC Radiophonic Workshop came out of, tape manipulation and working with synthesizers and synthesis to make sounds. So that's kind of the what I was learning about was that. It was a bit of computer programming, a bit of analog electronics, and music education, all mixed together with acoustics and other music stuff. But I hadn't done any like what we would call like sound design work, or sound effects editing work. So that's the main reason I did the master's degree, was to get experience of that and to be able to put together a demo reel, so I could then start applying for jobs and be like, hey, look what I can do. And I guess I was ahead of the curve insofar as I'm sure there's a lot more people that want to be a sound designer working in games now than there was then, because I was the only person on my master's degree course that had any interest in working in games. Like, everyone else was all interested in film, TV work. So I guess I was a bit of an oddball in that regard. But that was just my background as a massive nerd.
Well, look what you achieved since then, though. It's been incredible. I mean, is that what it was? You put a show together and then applied to Sony and got the job soon after uni? Is that what happened?
I applied to a few places. So I applied to Rockstar North in Edinburgh, the folk that make Grand Theft Auto, and they interviewed me.
Wow.
And I didn't get that job. But like, who knows why? But I mean, I was just like some guy, basically, with a demo reel. I didn't necessarily like who knew what was to come for me. So
exactly.
I was gutted about that, because obviously they're in Edinburgh and I'm from Edinburgh originally, so that would just have been perfect. But like, who knows where I would, if I'd got a job, where would it be now? I'd probably, maybe I'd still be there, and no one would have heard of me, but I would be earning a lot more money working on GTA. Who knows? But I remember applied to, I think what was the precursor to Guerrilla Games. It was a company called Lost Boys. I can't remember.
That sounds familiar, though.
There was some company. I didn't get an interview with them, and I think there was one more. There was Eutechnics, which was I think they're still going there now. Ubisoft Newcastle, but they were a racing studio, and they did actually get back to me for an interview, but I'd already got the job at Sony at that point. So, and then the Sony job. I applied, and according to them, I was the best of a bad bunch.
Really?
which is why they hired me. But I think, who knows how much of that is truth versus just, your typical workplace banter. I don't know.
Oh man, but how much did you learn in your time at Sony? Because it was a few years you said earlier, but how
I mean, to be honest, I don't think I could have had a better first job in the industry. It was mad, actually. It was just a very interesting time in Sony's history. So this is the PlayStation 2 era. I can't remember exactly when that came out. 2001, 2002, I want to say. So I joined 2004 after it had come out. And as like PlayStation 2 was just like huge success. At that point, it was the most successful games console of all time. It might still be. I can't quite remember if PS4 surpassed that or not. But you know, Sony basically were just like printing money.
Yeah.
They were just like, what do we do with all this money? Oh my god! And like, just as being like a a young 20-something in London at the time, just working in Soho was just like great place to be. It's just like this great, like, I mean, I just remember like the Friday night drinking on the streets outside the pub, just loving it. And like, there would be the mad thing about London studio at that point is it was making on a huge number of games. Like, there was one year it released like 13 different SKUs. A lot of it was SingStar, because that they released a lot of different SKUs for that. SKUs like stock allocation unit or something. It's like it's like a sales retail terminology, but yeah, they just released a huge. And every time that there was a release of a different product, they would have a party, a launch party. And it was just like, it used to be they maybe ship 1 or 2 things a year, but they were shipping like a dozen things. So there was like basically a party every month. And they got to the point they were just like, this is ridiculous, and they stopped it. But I was there at that point where it was just ridiculous, basically.
Wow.
And so like, that's got nothing to do with making games. That's just like this, because like that just wouldn't happen anymore. It was just because the industry was growing and Sony were really successful, and so all their like previous way of doing things were just like accelerating to the point where no one was thinking about it. And so it was just a bit mad, really. It was just slightly crazy, and like people had to sort of take control of it a little bit, I suppose. But that was just a really interesting time to get into the industry, where obviously it had been growing and growing, but it was at that point where it was really just like massively taking off. And so the other nice thing for me about the fact that Sony were cash rich and were working a huge number of projects, a big part of that came from, so Phil Harrison, who was the sort of, he's known now as like someone who's, because he was the person who headed up Google Stadia, and was previously at Microsoft, and before that he was at Sony, but he was a big part of Sony Europe, and he worked out the same building that I was in, at Sony in London, and he was responsible for just taking a lot of punts on, because they had so much money. They were like, well, we can afford to take risks. And I guess Phil, as an entrepreneur, is a bit of a risk taker, but that's why I ended up working on projects like the iToy games and SingStar, because those are projects which were massively successful. SingStar in particular just made, again, huge, so millions and millions of units, particularly in Europe. Never took off in the States, but it was massive in Europe, and that was all just because Phil took a gamble on basically making a karaoke game.
That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Basically, they never said the K word because it's got like certain connotations, but basically, obviously it's karaoke, but it scores you because it measures your the notes that you're making, and that came out of like there was I think it was a lady called Chiru Gupta, who's remarried. I can't remember her new surname, but she was Chiru Gupta at the time. But Chiru, I think she was a PhD student who did like the basic core technology of the pitch analysis in SingStar, and so that's all like some weird like incubator academic crossover thing, which then gave way to a product, which again they took a gamble on, and it's probably the most successful product that ever came out of London studios. So that's kind of the environment I was in, where they were just taking massive risks, and so. Again, that was great for me, because the other side of them working on a huge number of things is the audio department just wasn't coping with the amount of work that there was. So that created a job for me, because they needed a junior to come in to like help do all this stuff. But it also meant that, because my expectation when I joined was that I was going to be working on projects with more experienced people so I could like learn from them. But actually what happened was I just got put on projects on my own. And because everyone was busy just like trying to tread water because there was so much work, they just let me get on with it. And that's not a situation, again, which I think would happen in any other context, because you don't generally hire people and then just leave them to drown. It's not, of course not. And you wouldn't give them that responsibility, but I think their hands were tied. And fortunately, I was good enough that they were able to just like let me get on with stuff. But like my first project was a project called iToy Chat, which was basically just like a webcam communication thing on PlayStation. So it wasn't even a game, it was like an application. But you could play like chess or drafts or battleships, I think, in it. It's like, so again, just a complete gamble. I don't think anyone bought that thing because it was a risk which didn't pay off.
Yeah,
but
unfortunately.
that basically, because that was like not a particularly interesting project to work on, so they gave me that and were just like, there you go, Kenny, it's your first project, have fun. And I did some terrible things in that. Like I remember at the time, some of the sounds I put in were maybe a little bit too compressed and maybe slightly distorted, and I was like, it's fine. If it's terrible, someone will tell me.
Yeah.
But like no one else in the audio department necessarily even particularly paid much attention to it, and we shipped that thing with those sounds in it. And I remember thinking, that's like, I wasn't too happy about it, and so but there's some really important lessons there. And like, you can't rely on other people to tell you whether your work's good or not. You've got to be happy with it. And when that project ships, if you don't want to feel like dead inside, then you need to do what you can to make sure that you're really pleased with what you've done, and that it's good to like your standards. And similarly, there's like another project I worked on where much bigger project, which was the Getaway Black Monday, which was like the next game I worked on after iToy Chat. And again, there was other sound designers on that, but the other chap on that was a chap called Gary Taylor, and he did the cinematics basically, but I did all the in-game sounds, so all the pedestrian sounds, character sounds, weapons. Gary did the car engines, to be fair, so he did that bit, but I did everything else.
Wow.
And so for someone straight out of uni to be working on what was at the time a AAA game, like look at it now, like it's just a bit like there's not much sound in it, it's very much of its time. But that was the level of responsibility I was being given, and just about managing to sort of to cope with it. But I learned just loads just by being thrown at the deep end and being allowed to fail, basically, because that's not something which people get to do when they're in an in-house situation. Generally, you hire a junior, you get them to do like stuff which other people don't want to do, like dialogue editing, even though it's actually really important. That mindset's changed now in the industry, but at the time it was like, when you're a junior, you just edited lots of dialogue. So I recorded and edited for months and months in the first few years I was there, and I developed massive respect and massive dislike for game dialogue and use of voice as a result. But again, all great experience, and it was just, like I say, it was very much just the situation that was happening in that studio at that time, and I was like caught up in this whirlwind. But I learned a lot. So the original question was like, what was it like working there, and did you learn a lot? It's like I learned a lot, but it was kind of School of Hard Knocks style of learning. It wasn't like through training or like, let me show you how you do this. It was just like, there you go.
Go with it.
Which again, that worked for me. Like, I'm quite happy to just get my hands dirty and try stuff out and learn that way, learn through doing. So again, for my personality type or whatever, that completely worked fine. And then I guess, and I learned loads about various different things. And one of the guys I sat beside was a music licenser who worked in the music licensing department there, which was a new department that was formed specifically to cope with all the licensing going on for the SingStar franchise.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, and I learned loads. Like, I didn't really work on SingStar as a project like at all. I wasn't on that team, so I helped out with someone else who wrote music for the menus. I did a little bit of like playing guitar or whatever on that, but like I just wasn't involved in the projects otherwise. But I learned so much about music licensing just from being in the same room as someone doing that work and listening to them on the phone, like talking to people at record labels and publishers, negotiating rights for licensed music. And that wasn't my job, but just through osmosis, picking up all that insight was really useful. And when I joined Media Molecule, and I was responsible for putting together the license soundtrack from the sort of creative point of view, knowing what the process was that the licensor was going to go through, and what the kind of lead times are on being able to license the track, and what the kind of money involved is depending on the how famous the artist is, basically. Also, different record labels behave in different ways, and some are keen to promote their artists, others just want money. And like, just understanding that whole world meant that I didn't have to go through that, what is actually quite a difficult subject area to learn about. I just kind of knew all that stuff instinctually because I'd been in a room with someone and we'd chat about it, and I'd be like, why were you doing that? What was that conversation all about? And, and you just pick stuff up. And yeah, there was so much at my early days at Sony which just were hugely important things to learn, that meant that, so when I joined Media Molecule, I only had 4 years experience, which isn't a lot in the greater scheme of things, to again be responsible for well, in retrospect, because Little Big Planet was huge, so it's again, it's completely ridiculous that you had this person with 4 years experience responsible for the audio in what went on to be one of the most successful new IPs on PlayStation 3. But at the time, again, Media Molecule, little plucky startup company, and they liked me and they liked my work, and the job test they got me to do and all this. So I lucked out in getting that job and being given that amount of responsibility, and they lucked out, it turns out, to get someone who could do an amazing job. So yeah, at the beginning of really early on in my career, I was basically responsible for the audio experience in this hugely successful game, and that meant that my profile kind of went from zero to hero really, really quickly. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't know if I'll ever work in anything as successful as this again, because it was just a real phenomenon, and certainly was an industry darling. It was commercially successful, but it just picked up loads of awards, and so it was just an amazing experience, amazing company to work at, and it was a real roller coaster, and it was the most fun project I've ever worked on, and the development process just sort of it was hard work because there was just a lot to do, but it was very clear what the project needed. So it was easy in that regard. There was no soul searching for what am I going to do. It was just I know what I've got to do, I just need to actually get on and do it. So it was kind of effortless in that way, and I've not really had that experience since. It was just, I guess I was the right person for that project at the time. But yeah, that basically set me up for the future, because now I'm still dining out on being the person responsible for the audio in Little Big Planet. I should take all the credit. I obviously worked with other composers and sound designers, Sony music licensing folk I worked with, but ultimately, it was me who was responsible for making all the big decisions. And as a freelancer now, all the work I get is off the back of that, be that my reputation or people I worked with. The people I'm working with right just now on an undisclosed project are one of them is ex Media Molecule, and we'd worked together, and they recommended me to the folk they're working with. And that's how it kind of works as a freelancer. It's we talk about your network of contacts and people you've worked with, and that was the other great thing about working at Sony back then, is all those hundreds of people I worked with, and now all over the industry. Some are still at Sony, some are other places, but 99% of the work I get as a freelancer is people I've worked with before. So it's very rare that I get a call and it's someone who I don't know, and they're just like, hey, we love your stuff, are you available? Generally speaking, whenever that's happened, which is only once or twice, it doesn't work out for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I pitch for it and I don't get it, or I'm not available, whatever it is. But generally speaking, that social side of things is really important. So human beings are social creatures, and that's why trying to kickstart a freelance career from scratch when you're just, so that's the other thing to say. Sorry, I know I'm going all over the place here, but just to I'm sure you've got a do you have any advice for people type question coming up in your back pocket. So the thing that's the most important thing to get your head around is if you can get a job in-house in games, then by all means do it, because you'll get that amazing experience that I had, and you don't have to stay anywhere forever. Sony was a great place to be, but you might find yourself at a less desirable company for a year or two, and that's fine. But once you've got your foot on the ladder, you're sorted. You've got experience, you can move other places if that's what you want to do. But getting an in-house job as a composer is just it's not a thing, basically. Statistically not going to happen. There are a very small number of jobs working with music in-house, and they're generally senior positions. They want an experienced composer, not someone straight out of school. Whereas with sound design, it's a different kettle of fish. Like there are opportunities for juniors there. So I would always encourage people to do that, because trying to be a freelancer and get your own thing off the ground, as I'm sure you know, is a huge amount of work, and it's a real grind. And the truth is that for the first few years, it's hard to get traction, because you are a nobody. You don't know anyone. You don't have a network. So no one knows who you are. No one's heard your work, and no one cares, because the world is cold, right? So getting to a point where you have shipped stuff, people do know your work, people do like your work, people know you and like you, that just takes time. And it's a commitment, and you've got to go through that like rite of passage of just not getting anywhere for a few years. And it's hard, and it's psychologically very difficult to persist through that desert until you can start to get to the oasis of an established career. It's hard. I did not have to go through that. So whenever people ask me for advice for composers, I'm like, everyone's route is different, right? Everyone's story is different, but mine's one that was very much like, I went all in sound design, and then music sort of found me and came back into my life. Most freelance composers have had to go through that sort of just bashing their head against the wall thing for whatever it is, 5 to 10 years. It's not, unless you're really lucky, it's not a quick process. And the other thing is, most people won't make it, because it's just, there's a huge number of people that want to write music for a living. Understandably, it's just a fun thing. It has its challenges, but it's something that a lot of people want to do. So my advice for anyone is you've got to be in it for the love of it, because that's the only thing that's going to see you through to all those hard times, to get to the hopefully the good times.
Oh God, for sure. That's why, like, obviously I love your work so much. I'm a huge fan, but that's why I respect you as well, because of the work you do on the audio mentoring project as well, where people can reach out to you for work as well. And I know you sit on the board for GDC as well, give advice to people. And
I think so. Like that's another side to like what I've always done is, I don't know why I help people, because it's time and effort. But I guess I remember what it was like when I was in their shoes, and I didn't know anyone, and I didn't know how things worked, and like that. And it's difficult. And I remember like writing to people and just being like, I can't say I never like asked anyone for help, but I definitely wrote to people just to like try and connect with some of the industry and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I really enjoy. And that was it. Whenever I read anything online that I found useful, I always used to write to the person who wrote it to say thank you. Just, I don't know why. It's what I did. And maybe it was just a desperate attempt to connect with someone who did what I wanted to do. But and I never led to anything. It was just, again, I think it's just that human sort of social thing I was talking about before. It's just nice to sort of try and connect with people whose work you admire. But for some reason, like, I started writing articles. I think that came out of my master's degree, actually, because we had to obviously write for that. And writing's not something I'd ever enjoyed or took any pleasure, or it was just like a chore. It was like like homework bullshit thing I had to do. But for some reason, maybe again just good teaching, there was some stuff I wrote where, but I guess it was about something I was passionate about. There was one thing I wrote. It was an article on the use of sound in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Kubrick film, and I really enjoyed writing it because I basically would watch the film and had some thoughts about the use of sound in it and wrote them down. And the chap marking it, a chap called Sean Street, who's a really great guy, and certainly a great teacher, a really inspiring person. He really enjoyed it too, because I got an A. Because my writing as a student was just I was like a C, a B if I was lucky kind of student. Because I just never, what is this all about? It never worked out. But once I was writing about something I was passionate about, and I realized that I could see the relationship between me being excited about what I was thinking and writing it, and then the audience of one, that sort of translating to their enjoyment of what I'd done too. And it was that the realization for me was that writing is not about the writing, it's about the thinking. Because writing is just written down thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, maybe it's different for someone who does creative writing, but for someone who just tries to write their thoughts down, tries to convey their thoughts through the written word, it was realizing that that's what the point is. So if you don't have anything to say,
Yeah.
of course your writing is shit, because there's nothing worth reading, right? And I know that's obvious in retrospect, but I'd never made that link. And I guess it's because I was never writing about anything I was excited about. And that's probably a very typical problem for anyone who's writing anything. So that was really inspirational for me, because at that point I then realized that, well, whenever I'm excited about something, it's worth writing about it, because someone will, not everyone, but someone will connect with that. And it's the same for writing music. If you don't have anything to express, you're going to write shit.
Yeah.
And that's not to say some people might not like it, because you might find an audience, but basically if you want to connect with an audience, you've got to have something to say to them. So it's the same, and it's the same for all creative work, of course. It's just, I don't know at what point people learn that, but as soon as you do, that's when something clicks, and it just, everything gets a little bit easier from that point. So to cut a long story short, I've always written. I don't write as much as I'd like. I'm part of the one, again, it's like, this is like an advice thing, but generally speaking, one big motivational thing for me in my career has been to do things that other people aren't doing. And that's always smart because it makes you stand out from the crowd. So it's very tempting to just see what other people are doing and to copy it. But actually, if you just follow this thing you're passionate about and you see that no one else is doing it, it immediately makes you look very cool.
Yeah, it's so true.
Because at that point, like, it doesn't matter that there's not an audience. Like I say, if you're excited about it, you can be damn sure other people will be excited about it too. That's just how it works. Like, unless you're that much of a freak that the things that excite you don't excite anyone else, which I'm sure there are people like that out there who are truly, original thinkers and avant-garde. But I obviously occupy a happy space where if stuff excites me, it's like accessible enough to your other like average human being or average audio person or whatever it is, that there's a connection there. And like that's the reason why I wrote originally, was because there was so few people writing about game stuff, just very little content out there. That's why I started the website gamesound.org back in the day.
I was about to ask about that.
It's like a terrible resource in many respects. It's a bit of a cross to bear, because I update it like once a year with a bunch of articles from the previous year of other stuff people have written. But something I was really passionate at one point, like 10 years ago. But I maintain it out of sort of respect to my past self. But yeah, it's like, so I started that website because there was very few places on the internet where you could read about game audio. And so that I did that, and then that led to me, I think, speaking at conferences. That led to me being on the advisory board for GDC. And yes, like another thread that's like this thing that's been a part of my career. And yeah, I would encourage people to write and to share their thoughts, or to make podcasts, or whatever outlet it is you want to do to express yourself. But yeah, I think it's been good for me. And as a freelancer now, it's never bad to take these opportunities just to share your passion, because you never know who's watching or what might happen. But exactly. Yeah, I think just being enthusiastic and passionate about what you do, I think, is really important, and I always admire that in anyone else. Because if you're good and passionate, it's never a bad combo.
And then going from being a C&B student to then winning 2 articles yourself, to the Gang Best Game Audio Article Publications.
Yeah, I've been nominated for that one a few times and won it a couple of times. Yeah. Which is nice, because I mean that just means that there's a certain. Well, it means people have read it and liked it, which is nice. But awards are never motivation enough for doing something, but it's nice little pat in the back. Especially something like the Gang Awards they're quite niche, because it's all, they're awards that you just wouldn't get at a wider industry award, because they're all niches within the niche of audio. Hence, best publication article or broadcast in a niche subject. But yeah, it's knowing that your peers respect your work is nice.
It's brilliant, because I know that you got them for the User Voice in Portal 2 and the mix in The Last of Us as well. Amazing.
Yeah, which was I mean, the Last of Us one was an interview with Phil Kovacs and Jonathan Lanier. Phil used to be the audio director at Naughty Dog. He's now like a more sort of senior audio director within Sony America, supervising the various different studios there. But Jonathan's still the audio coder at Naughty Dog, and they're just both really interesting people. And I would say that was a really amazing experience, an amazing audio experience. And I just wanted to speak to them about it. And unfortunately, I knew them because of like, you know, Sony stuff. Like we'd met, so it's very easy for me to be like, hey, do you want to do it? So because I just like this, you know, I just asked them some questions. And I think that's the thing. It's like quite often, thing that I dislike about awards is like people win awards, but you never get any insight into why they won the award. So it's kind of meaningless, because ultimately when you win an award, it's just some people's opinion. Right? There's usually a jury, or it might just be like a membership have voted on it. So it's like this aggregated thing, which I kind of don't really like that. I would much rather have like even just like one person be like, you're the best, but tell you why, because being told your stuff is good doesn't really mean anything. Like it's like, why? Like what is it about that makes you like it so much? Like that's the important thing. So I had such huge respect for what they'd done with the audio experience in The Last of Us that I just wanted to get information out of them, and just kind of for me,
of course,
just selfishly, but then to share it with people in an article. And I think that stuff's really important, and that's just not something that happens really. I would quite happily spend my days, if I was to win the lottery, I would like just interview people and pick their brains, just because you know that I think getting that insight is hugely valuable. And yeah,
it's so tricky. I'm exactly the same as you, which is why I adore the podcast, because you get to sit down with such amazing people like yourself and learn about the insights of how it was to work, say, in different companies or games during those eras. I mean, it's incredible. It's really addictive, because you learn so much, don't you? Just to sit and chat with someone, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's when you get that connection and they say something which really either inspires you, or it's something you can like file away for like a rainy day, and there'll be a project you're working on and they'll be like, that thing they said, you're like, oh yeah, and then it just becomes a kernel for something else. And I think that part of the creative process is always it's the hardest bit, and that's why like starting is always the hardest, because like finishing is just like effort, whereas starting is like, where are you going to get that thing that's going to actually make it worth doing? Where's it going to come from? That's the hardest bit. So the more more inspiration you've got, the easier that is. And it's never easy, but like you just need something to draw upon. And for me, it always comes back to like the conceptual side of projects. So and I think that's also why I get hired, because I'm definitely not the best composer, and I'm not the best sound designer. Well, I mean, if you look at like my music, it's not as sophisticated as other people's. Well, it depends what vector you're looking at it. Like harmonically, my harmonic language, like as a fiddle player, like, so I'm not a piano player. I've got some minor guitar chops, but like nothing that I would want anyone to pay me for, to pay to see. But like, I don't have a very sophisticated harmonic language, because I'm just not a harmonic instrumentalist. So melody I find relatively effortless as a fiddle player. Like I see a definite connection between those things. But yeah, harmony is like a little bit of a mystery to me. And like a lot of people, I just kind of use my ear, but I certainly don't have a vast like music theory knowledge underpinning that. Because you're a pianist, right?
I am.
So you'll be like infinitely more capable and sophisticated than I am as a composer in that vector, because you'll just like have all this stuff at your fingertips that I'm just like so I've got a keyboard in front of me that you can't see, but, and that's the thing. But I've got a great ear, and maybe as a sound designer, I enjoy bringing a lot of little sound ideas and stuff into my music. So I think my production chops are pretty good. But yeah, I think that's why my stuff, a lot of my stuff's clearly quite poppy. And again, I think that comes down to, well, I love pop music, or like I say, I don't really listen to much. So like, I think a lot of my influences are like from the 80s and stuff like that, which is, I've enjoyed writing a bit of synthwave and stuff recently because it's sort of just, you know, a guilty pleasure to go there.
Cool.
Unfortunately, it's fashionable. So, you know, it's a marriage made in heaven. But yeah, like a lot of my chord progressions are quite simple. My musical forms are generally quite poppy in their like binary form. And yeah, I'm not like an avant-garde composer. I can't imagine anyone's ever going to hire me to, write any symphonic music or anything like that. Because that, like, there's people who are infinitely better at that than I am. But if you want some like cheesy, poppy, VGM-inspired music, which is the kind of stuff that I was writing in Little Big Planet and that I've been doing more recently in the Astrobot games, the Astro's Playroom on PlayStation 5 and Astrobot Rescue Mission on PlayStation VR. It just happens to be a really good fit for my skills. And yeah, it's I don't know what I was going to say. I was like, yeah, I'm not the best composer in the world, but I think the reason I get hired is that because I really think a lot about and I'm good at creating like conceptual links between the project as a whole and the audio experience. That's where my skill as an audio director is. That's why I get hired as a sound designer and composer. It's because I'm good at that bit. And that's actually quite hard to do. That's something which a lot of people struggle with. So I'm really fortunate that that's kind of what my superpower is, because it means that even with my limited sound design and composition skills, if you've got that bit, you can use whatever else you've got to like realize that sort of audio direction, if you like. And yeah, I think that's what gets me work, because what I'm proud of the projects I've worked on and the audio experiences I've made is that they are unique. Like, they are, sure, they've got like pop culture references in them, and so there's aspects of it that are derivative, but the point is there's no other project out there that sounds like the things that I do. When I get the opportunity to do that, be it, you know, be a Little Big Planet or a Tearaway or an Astrobot game. And that's ultimately why I get hired, is to be the person that can create something unique for, because these are new IPs as well, right? It's not like I'm working on a Star Wars game and where the job is like pretend to be John Williams. It's like, no, we want you to create something new that is going to support this experience and make it stand out in the market. Because ultimately, the job is, you want to create something amazing, but you're trying to persuade people to part with a significant amount of cash for a game. And so it's got to be good, it's got to be interesting, it's got to be engaging. And ideally, it would be like a bit of a talking point, something that people say, oh, this game's great, love the gameplay, it looks fantastic, and it sounds good. Like, that's my job, is to make people think that and tell their friends about it.
Exactly. I mean, I won't keep you for much longer than how busy you are, but
1:10.
Yeah, you gotta go, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's lunchtime.
I know. I'll go in a second. Don't worry. But I wanted to actually ask about your time at Media Molecule, actually. Because obviously you've gone from Sony to there. I mean, and you said that Media Molecule, they knew what they were aiming towards. They knew what they were doing. I mean, when you went from Sony to Media Molecule, were the ideas of Tearaway and Little Big Planet already in the talks when you were there, or were they after you joined?
Oh yeah, Tearaway. No, that wasn't a glint in anyone's eyes at that point. I mean, I can talk about that, but the genesis of that project. But Little Big Planet had already been announced at the point I joined them. So it was announced at GDC in March 2007, and I joined them at the end of May. So basically, I'd actually seen a job I was looking to leave Sony. I was actually trying to get a job back up in Scotland, because that's where my wife and I were having a long distance relationship. So it was like crazy. I was trying to get a job back up there. And it wasn't happening. There weren't that many jobs available. And so, yeah, I wasn't desperate to get out of Sony particularly, but I just wanted to get back to Scotland. And I'd seen, looking for jobs, I'd seen the Media Molecule job, but they were nobody knew who they were at that point. They had a cool looking website. But I didn't know any of the people. I knew some of the games they'd worked on, but I didn't know them. So they were just like some people on the internet. And so I just, ignored it. And I was trying to get back to Scotland. But then Little Big Planet was announced, and I just thought it was amazing. And also I just knew what that they needed and what it needed to sound like. And was really inspired by it. So I applied, and yeah, we used to joke about my job interview because it was a very strange. It was like the best job interview anyone's ever done ever. Like, and I'm not saying that because I'm like, hey, I'm great. It was a very strange experience for me too. It was like, it just went so well. It was ridiculous. And I was really excited to meet them, and having seen what they'd done, and they didn't disappoint. They're like this crazy bunch of super talented people, technologists, artists, and yeah, they were just really nice. And yeah, I just really wanted that job basically. And fortunately, Nicola, my partner, once I got it, agreed to come move down south, and the rest is history.
You're amazing.
We're married now, got
Yay.
kids and all the rest of it. So it all worked out. But yeah, it was that period at Media Molecule was just amazing. Like I said, it was sort of a project just sort of ran itself in a way, which is a terrible thing to say because there was a lot of hard work, particularly people like Siobhan, the studio director, who's senior producer on that, and is the one who was making it all go seamlessly. But I absolutely took that for granted, and I just had it was a brilliant project, just couldn't have gone better really.
Yeah.
And leaving Media Molecule was a difficult decision too, because it was a great place to be, but the company had changed a lot. Like when I joined, I was like employee number 15 or something, and the point I left, I think they were up to nearly 60 people.
Wow.
I think they're up at 100 now.
Wow.
So yeah, they got a lot bigger. So like it changed a bit. And I think the other thing, which is that because Dreams is an amazing project too, and I actually worked on that for 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
Believe it or not, because it was because it started at the same time as Tearaway. So yeah, so I didn't talk about Tearaway. I mean, Tearaway was basically intended to be a bit of a holding pen for talent within the studio, because we finished up on Little Big Planet 2. We decided we didn't want to do Little Big Planet games anymore, so we sort of handed that off to XDev, our publishing partner at Sony, and to Sumo, and who made Little Big Planet 3 and did the most recent Sackboy's Big Adventure game for PlayStation 4 and 5. And so yeah, we were basically moving on to new things, and it didn't make sense to have the whole team, probably about 30 people at that point, to just all be working on Dreams, because it was like, you have to understand, there was nothing. Yeah, we're literally starting from zero, so you can't just have a full team of people like working on nothing. So Tearaway had started a bit before Dreams, kinda sort of ramping up for a few months, and then about half the company was working on Tearaway, and so I was the only person in the company working on both projects. It's just a weird thing that happened. Audio is just like treated differently to everything else. And I was trying to hire someone actually to work on Tearaway so I could just focus full time on Dreams, and struggled with that. Hiring as a whole,
I can imagine,
kettle of fish, which is something like, again, that was something I was learning the whole time I was at Media Molecules, hiring how to be a manager and stuff. And it's not something I particularly enjoy or am very good at, I don't think, because I'm very much interested in like hands-on making stuff. So anyway, I was on Tearaway and Dreams. And Dreams was just in kind of like this blue sky mode for the first few years, just a whole bunch of different experiments going on, which was great, fun to be part of. But it kind of wasn't, there was stuff happening, but it wasn't like, Dreams like mission was like just to, you can create anything. Yeah. Right. So that's like so high level that it's like, even though we're making progress, it wasn't like coming together. It was just a bunch of stuff that was all exploring making anything. And all the graphics technology was coming together, and I was like doing like audio technology development basically. I was working on Tearaway, and then it got to the point where actually Dreams had been in development for like two and a half years, and it got to the point where Sony were starting to ask questions like, hey, how's it going on Dreams, everybody? And they didn't have much to show, to be honest, so that made Tearaway really important, because I think Siobhan in particular realised that Tearaway needed to sort of deliver another like Media Molecule hit for Sony, so that it could take the pressure off Dreams, because it needed a bit more time to bake, basically. And subsequently went on to be like a 9-year project. So it was like
9 years.
Yeah. So this is back in 2011. Basically.
Wow.
So 10 years ago. Well, that's when it started. So I'm talking about 2013 time period. And so anyway, I came off of Dreams and Siobhan came off of Dreams to focus on Tearaway full time. And so Tearaway was a difficult project too. It was a little bit lost in the weeds, but Siobhan again and Rex and Dave Smith all went off site for a few days to just like, because it was this crazy like GPS location based thing. It was like papercraft Pokemon Go before. It was because we were trying to use all the different features on the Vita, and so it was a bit of a mess. There was just too much stuff. They went off site and like boiled it down to like, what is this? What are we trying to make? And then we had a game jam to like focus on that stuff. And we showed the results of that to Shuhei Yoshida, and he was like, "This is great, right? You're going to announce this at Gamescom in 6 weeks." So we had to like go from like this like R&D game jammy, slightly troubled project to like announcing the game, and so we had to get our shit together basically. And then from then until we shipped it, it was like 6 to 9 months or something like that. So we basically made that game in that period. There was a bunch of technology and there was a bunch of ideas and stuff, but there was not like there was any levels. It was like that all came together very quickly, and the music was done in about 3 months too. So yeah, there's loads more I could talk about in that project, but that was just like a real focus. And then so I moved after we shipped that. Tearaway Unfolded, which was the PS4 version, was in development. I came off of Tearaway and I'd hired some people who were really good at that point, Ed Hargrave and freelancer Todd Baker was in the mix too, and they were basically, I kind of wasn't involved in the sound design on Tearaway Unfolded. I was lead sound designer on Tearaway and co-composer in that, but I was just really the co-composer and hands-off audio director on Tearaway Unfolded. Ed and Todd really handled the sound design on that thing completely. And it was a weird like sequel stroke expanded version of the original game, so it didn't need me basically. But I was on Dreams, and that was the thing, was like Dreams was it was kind of technology and tools development more than it was game development. So I wasn't really enjoying that, and I really enjoyed Tearaway. Was a difficult project and it was hard work, but I really enjoyed it, and I was involved in things outside of audio too, like wrote the voice script for that with Rex, and then I came up with the name Tearaway. It was just one of many names that other people came up with too, but mine was the one that was chosen. So I'm really proud of like my contributions towards the IP outside of the sound and music too. But that was the thing on Dreams, was it wasn't really game development, and I didn't enjoy it, and the company was getting bigger, and it was very clear that I was going to have to grow the audio department to support the vision of Dreams, and I didn't really find that very attractive. So just sort of rather painfully came to the conclusion over the course of over a year that I just didn't. This is not what I wanted to do, which was really hard because I loved Media Molecule, really proud of everything that the company had done, and I was a big part of that. So it was just a bit awkward. It was like I just kind of wished it hadn't gone that way, so I could have stayed doing what I loved there. But it's just sometimes you just have to accept that it's not for you. So I made a difficult decision to leave. But on the plus side, fortunately, so I decided to go freelance is the other thing, which is I just didn't really fancy working in house because Media Molecule is such a great place to work. I just didn't really think there was anywhere else in the UK that I wanted to go. I would have probably joined a startup and done something from scratch, but no opportunity like that presented itself. So I decided I would go freelance and see what fish I could catch in that net. Unfortunately, that's all worked out. So I'm really pleased that it did. But that's a potted history of Media Molecule.
Lovely. And that is a brilliant way to end the podcast, I feel, as well. I mean, I can ask you so many more questions, so many more.
Well, another time with sure. Beer.
Exactly. I'd love to. You deserve one. But I just want to say thank you so much for today. I really loved it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cool. All right, mate. Cheers for the opportunity.
And how can people find you as well online, by the way, just in case? How can people find you?
You can check me out on Twitter. I'm at KCM Young, or I've got my website, kennyyoung.com is my music, much more professional looking music website, and then my slightly more scrappy indie sound design audio direction website is oddbod.com, AUDBOD.
Lovely, perfect. Lovely. Thank you so much again, Kenny. I really loved it. Thank you.
All right, cheers,
And
George.
as always, take care, everyone. Bye bye.